During a basketball game in 2008, Romechia Sims met Ji-Aire Lee. James was working as a security guard that night, and after a few passing glances, the two struck up a conversation. In the following days, what began as casual talks quickly grew into something deeper. Soon they were inseparable. Both lived in Clinton, Maryland, a quiet town of just over 40,000 people. Life wasn't perfect, but love made it easier to endure. By the end of 2010, Romechia discovered she was pregnant. Money was tight, she still lived with her mother Romechia Sims, and James shared a small apartment with a friend. Yet the news of a baby brought joy, not fear. In August 2011, their son was born. His name was Ji-Aire, and even as a toddler, he filled every room with energy. Family and friends would say he was a child who never wanted to stop playing, the kind of little boy who made everyone smile. In 2013, James finally managed to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in La Plata, Maryland. For the first time, the family lived under one roof. Ji-Aire was just 2 years old and had already formed a strong bond with his older cousin. Together they would spend endless hours playing soccer and video games. The apartment may not have been much, but it was theirs. And for a while, happiness seemed to live there too, but cracks soon appeared. In 2014, arguments and differences tore Romechia and James apart. The couple separated, and though James moved out, he still tried to provide for his son. Romechia, meanwhile, continued raising Ji-Aire in the apartment. She worked as a sales associate and studied at university, chasing her dream of one day becoming a teacher. On the outside, everything looked normal, but beneath the surface, a silent storm was beginning to build. When Romechia lost her job, her world collapsed. Bills piled up, and with the added responsibility of caring for her son, she grew desperate. That's when something inside her mind shifted. She began hearing voices, whispers that weren't there, shadows that followed her everywhere. She became convinced that strangers were watching her, plotting against her. She would open the door to men she swore were armed and ready to kill her, yet every time, no one was there. Her mother, Romechia, grew alarmed. She rushed over whenever her daughter begged for help, but each time, nothing seemed real. Romechia's family even checked surveillance footage, desperate to prove her fears wrong. And there were no stalkers, no armed men, only hallucinations. Eventually, Romechia was taken to the hospital. After countless tests, doctors gave her a diagnosis that would change everything. Paranoid schizophrenia paired with depression. With medication, she was able to quiet the voices. But her condition demanded constant care. Knowing her daughter needed help, Romechia invited Romechia and little Ji-Aire to live with her in a roadside hotel she was staying at called the Deluxe. It wasn't a home, but it was shelter. Still, peace never lasted long. Neighbors often overheard explosive arguments between mother and daughter. Some even reported mistreatment of the little boy. Police were called more than once. But despite everything, Romechia never abandoned her child. She stayed, hoping things would get better. They didn't. In February 2015, after yet another fight, Romechia stormed out with her son, taking a taxi toward James's apartment. James wasn't expecting her, he only found out because Romechia called him. But when hours passed and they never arrived, James panicked. Retracing the taxi's route, he discovered something chilling. Romechia, in the middle of a hallucination, believed she was being chased. She opened the taxi door while it was moving and jumped out, dragging her son with her. James found her wandering in the freezing night, clutching Ji-Aire in thin pajamas, his tiny body shivering uncontrollably. He rushed them to the hospital, where doctors confirmed Romechia had stopped taking her medication. It was clear now she wasn't just struggling, she was dangerous to herself and her son. Desperate to protect his boy, James filed for full custody in March 2015. In court, he presented the evidence: her hospitalizations, her breakdowns, the terrifying incident on the highway. But the judge wasn't convinced. Despite everything, the court ruled both parents fit. Shared custody. 1 week with James, 1 week with Romechia. James left the courtroom shattered. Just 2 months later, Romechia stopped her medication again. The voices came back louder, more commanding. On May 20th, she told her mother that strangers had given her and her son a pill. Later that day, she promised she would take Ji-Aire to the pharmacy, then for food, then to the park. It sounded harmless. But that decision would lead to something no one could have imagined. At around 11:15 a.m., Romechia arrived at the park. She placed her son in a swing and began pushing. Hours passed. The sun fell. Darkness covered the sky. Yet she remained there, pushing, whispering to herself. When her mother called that evening, she assured her everything was fine, that she would be home soon. But she never returned. The next morning came and went. Still no sign of Romechia. 2 days later, a man walking through the park noticed something deeply unsettling. The same woman, the same child, the same swing. He had seen them there for days. Concerned, he called the police. When officers arrived, what they found was almost too much to comprehend. Romechia was still pushing her son on the swing. The little boy was motionless, his tiny body cold. It was less than 50 degrees Fahrenheit outside, and Ji-Aire had been there for 2 nights. He had died from dehydration and hypothermia. When questioned, Romechia calmly explained that the voices had told her not to take him off the swing, that something terrible would happen if she did. The news broke hearts across the country. A beautiful, bright 3-year-old boy was gone, lost not only to the cold, but to a mother's untreated illness. James, shattered with grief, could only think of the courtroom, of the custody ruling, of how this all could have been prevented. In 2016, Romechia stood trial. She pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter. But mental health experts testified that she wasn't fully aware of her actions, that her schizophrenia had consumed her. The judge agreed. Instead of prison, she was released under strict conditions: continuous treatment, regular evaluations, and no contact with children without supervision. To this day, she is said to visit Ji-Aire's grave often, bringing toys, singing songs, speaking to the son she loved but tragically couldn't protect from herself.